Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Power with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down with real Texans having real conversation about what's going on in our state. Today I am so excited to be joined by Terri Leo-Wilson, House Representative from District 23. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mandy. Thank you for being a champion.
Well, you as well, my friend, and I wanted to get you on here. You've been going through it and battling against the big ed cartel that has driven us into the ground in debt. For our viewers that don't know, we now have $236 billion in ISD debt. We spent, the numbers just came out today, we spent $104 billion or $18,792 per child in the state of Texas last year. These are massive numbers.
Yes.
This is why our property taxes are absolutely out of control. We have architects, engineering, construction, consulting, and lobbyists that have absolutely rigged the system against Texas taxpayers. They've created an iron triangle where they are passing legislation to protect themselves.
Yep.
They are funding trustees and funding political action committees to get these bonds passed. And they are also finding candidates to run against great leaders like yourself. And that's what I want you to talk about is let's hear how the iron cartel or the education cartel use that iron triangle to run a candidate against you and try and continue to push reckless spending.
Yes. Well, so I drew an opponent, but before that, the superintendent, Dr. Poole, started laying the groundwork. Mm-hmm. He started electioneering, really using the Parent Connect and social media as well to mischaracterize my position on things that were happening during the legislative session. Yeah. So, and I called him out on one of them and I said, well, this is not what we talked about. This is not what I said. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh yeah, you know it is. And so, and I was like, okay, something's up.
Yeah.
And so that continued. And you know, I kind of felt I was getting an opponent. So the director of the Education Fund, my opponent, his name was Nathan Watkins. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Poole is also the executive director of the Education Foundation, as well as the superintendent. Mm-hmm. 3 of the board members of the ISD also that transfer ISD monies over to the fund to avoid recapture, and they openly admit that.
Over $40 million.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? This is what you're talking about is these 313 abatement programs expired. Money was going to come in. They did not want it to be eligible for recapture.
Right.
And so before it even got there, basically this education foundation is made up with the superintendent, the finance director or deputy superintendent, current trustees, former trustees, city financial people. It's a whole kind of cabal is what it appears.
Exactly.
And so they said, nope, we're going to automatically redirect funds into a foundation which owns an apartment complex or something. Can you explain this to me?
Yes, it's a 501(c). Okay. So that is the very reason why you don't put public funds there, because you can't see what is happening with public funds. They claim it's 313 tax abatement money, but that's not donations still to a fund. That is a contract in lieu of paying property taxes that is done with a company.
Yeah.
And so those agreements, Barbers Hill, I think, has 2/3 of all the 313 agreements.
Right. It was so successful. Didn't Dr. Poole start a company called Jigsaw Solutions to teach others how to...
He's talked at TASB. And so he teaches others how to take advantage of that. Uh-huh. So they have a $175 million education foundation fund. It is the largest in the entire United States.
Wow.
In a town that has
8,000 kids or something?
Around 8,000 kids. So they say that their education purpose in building these luxury developments publicly, they say that that's to offer discount teacher housing. But I called, and the discount is not any really
I called.
different than
It was
Inwood.
$150 off of the application fee,
Yes.
which seems pretty. I've rented apartments before. That seems to be a pretty standard. And then I believe it was 6 weeks.
6 weeks
free
yes.
rent.
Yes,
Again,
correct.
pretty standard in leasing agreements. This is not something.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
Uh-huh.
And so they're buying property up around Barbers Hill. They just bought 311 acres from Rice University about 3 weeks ago.
Can I stop you? Who's
yes.
developing these properties?
Well, the one that's been built, the Brickyard, was
The
my
apartments.
opponent. So he sits as the director of the Education Foundation Fund, one of the directors.
Okay.
And he also is vice president of a company called America's Holdings.
Okay.
That has sold $6 million worth of property back to the Education Foundation Fund.
This real estate company,
Yes.
America's Holdings, has sold $6 million back to the ISD
Yes.
to develop on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and that, to me, that's a conflict of interest at the very least.
Yeah.
And so they use the Education Foundation Fund for things that do not have an educational purpose, of which it was established. For instance, lawsuits.
Okay.
So on mine, it's not just my lawsuit, but on my lawsuit, it was very politically motivated. They have $175 million to sue me. They sued me in my personal capacity for a statement that I gave the Texan. Holly Hansen asked me directly, why do you think you have an opponent? You've passed all of this rural legislation and brought tons of money into Chambers County. Why? And it is very much because of the
Iron Triangle.
Iron Triangle.
You also were trying to limit debt
Yes.
and property taxes.
Correct.
But that's how developers get rich, right?
Yes, and
Okay.
if we cap a rate, for instance, on, my opponent's also involved in what's called these P3 agreements,
Yeah.
these private property or private public partnerships. When you do that, when the legislature caps rates, and I'm all for capping rates and limiting local spending, well, then that puts them in a position, and really the people it puts in a position are the very taxpayers that they're supposed to serve, because those taxpayers never voted on a P3 agreement. They never got to opportunity. And at the TAC conference, they actually said,
Hold on.
elections are
What's TAC?
costly.
So
Texas Association of Counties.
This is one of the massive taxpayer-funded lobbying entities
Right.
that lobby to not have, this is a property tax increase on ballot initiatives.
Yes.
They lobby government. They are government.
Right.
Funded by government.
Yes.
Funded by taxpayers.
Yes.
They lobby government for more government, more spending.
Correct.
More debt, more
Correct.
that comes out of Texans' pockets.
Correct.
Okay,
And I
just wanna make sure.
actually have a recording of, I noticed my opponent, nothing says I'm more like you than flying around in your private jet, but he has his number on his private jet, which was on his commercial.
Oh.
So I followed his plane, and I knew the TAC conference where it was going to
that's
be,
pretty
and I saw
clever.
his little jet on that pathway, and then I noticed that 3 of my commissioners were also missing that day. So he went and told, explained to
Texas,
the Texas Association of Counties how counties could avoid those costly elections that just cost counties money and time, and it's so
give
expensive
voters-
to go to the voters. Yes, so now the voters are on, have this P3 agreement, which if the legislature caps the rates, that county is now going to have problems paying their debt and their bill that the taxpayers never asked for, that they never asked for the debt on. And so it's a way to end round having an election. It's a way to end round building a facility that you want to build without ever having to go to the taxpayers
Right.
for
So
permission.
Just to be, yes. Okay. So again,
Which I think they would have given permission.
Really?
The county did need a jail.
But they would probably have to put limits on the spending,
Correct.
right? This is kind of the whole thing. So this is what's happened. You and great state leaders have been doing everything you can to get around these evil taxpayer-funded lobbyists and pass real property tax relief.
Yes.
But at the local level, the system has been rigged where these bonds and these P3 agreements, they have figured out how to lie,
Yes.
market,
Yes.
start bonds,
Yes.
but also to do these P3 agreements, which says don't go ask the taxpayer if you want to take out hundreds of millions of dollars in debt.
And yep.
We can do it for you. Let's do a P3 agreement.
Right.
You don't have to ask them. You can drive them into debt, and they work it out where you're oftentimes paying significantly more for development.
Oh, 3 times.
3 times more.
And not only that, but the county jail is not big enough now. It's not serving its purpose, and now they're looking at having to put office space and things that should be part of that whole complex together outside. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so what they also do is then they sell that contract when the developer's done. In my case, my opponent has sold that, the county commissioners approved of the selling of that to a company in Minnesota, where we know like their 501(c)(3)s and all of those things are hidden in Minnesota law. So we can't see who's on the board anymore. We can't see who's running the show behind debt that is Texas citizen debt is now sold off to a company that you are paying rent to that's in Minnesota.
That's wild.
Yes.
And well, also, doesn't it,
because it's not transparent.
Then the companies here in Texas can wipe it. They sell it. They can wipe it from their books, so you don't actually have any accountability. Right? If something was wrong, if there was a problem, you actually can't go back to the company because they don't own it anymore.
Right.
We're done. We're going to move on to the next P3,
and then they could sell it to somebody else.
Or next apartment complex. Yep. Am I wrong? So let's go to the apartment complex that's owned by this private, and I say they're using the name, image, and likeness of the schools.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
To generate donations, and it's not just steering the money through the 313 abatement that's supposed to come in to the government coffers to the private C3 entity, but they also fundraise from a lot of these developers.
Yes.
And things like that.
Yes.
Okay. And so am I crazy in saying
they can say you don't get the contract on our new development unless you give to XYZ.
Right.
There's not a bidding process where you can just say you can get the contract if you give X amount back to our foundation or to a candidate, perhaps.
Do we know if they're using, so we used $41 million, that's taxpayer money to be clear, to steer to this private C3. Do we know, did they use the 41-ish or more million dollars as seed funding?
Well,
or what?
no, the P3 agreement was with the county. It just happened to be the same players.
Oh, okay. It's
but
the same. Is it America's Holdings?
Yes.
So it's America's Holdings, which your opponent,
also
Nathan
did
Watkins,
the development company, but they are
they're
two separate.
A lot of stuff in your area.
The one that was done through the Education Foundation was not a P3 agreement.
Okay. But
per se.
Okay. So the one with the Education Foundation, but was that money, do we know, was it a like seed funding for the development if they couldn't get traditional funding or something like that? Do we know?
We don't know.
We don't know.
And that's part of the problem with the 501(c)(3).
Yeah.
And why you don't move ISD money there, because you can't see what happened to it. You can't see what they're doing with it.
But it wasn't, didn't I see somewhere that Barbers Hill ISD, the ISD, the government entity, taxing entity, they were doing the books or the audits or something? I feel like they were on there.
They are not. Sometimes I've wondered who I'm being sued by, either the foundation or the ISD, because the ISD used all of that for electioneering. I mean, they would put out things that, well, it didn't come from the lawyer of the Education Foundation. It's coming from the communications director, and it's being put out on Parent Connect. Things like,
and that's how you talk to the community, the education community, when you talk about Parent Connect.
Right. Things like, well, you agreed to take all of your social media posts down concerning the article that you did with Holly Hansen in lieu of us non-suiting the case. That never happened. They have no shred of evidence. I've never agreed to do any such thing. I've never taken it down at all. But they'll put that out on Parent Connect to electioneer against me.
Right. Okay. So that means
I'm the bad actor.
Right. But the reality is didn't it get picked up? I mean, this grabbed the attention of the entire state. I saw lots of your colleagues commenting on this.
Yes.
Some people,
the governor's office commented.
Is this money laundering? What are they? I saw, but And then an investigation was launched by the Texas Education Agency, right?
Yes, and
so there had to be legs to the questions that you were asking.
And those legs were there well before I ever had this race on my hands. Those questions were already being put out there. And that's another electioneering complaint. I mean, they put it out their last thing saying that, well, one of the things their lawyer said at the end of my trial or at the end of my hearing was that, well, we're not going to give her any money because she's called all these investigations on us and cost us all this money and sending all this stuff. Well, I didn't engage in the activities that your education foundation funded or your ISD. That's not on me. That's on you if you're being investigated for something you have done, right? That's public knowledge that you have done.
Right.
I didn't run an investigation myself.
Yeah,
These are things I just discovered that are public. Yeah, that's public information. Yeah. But that is where they have continued to blur the line, saying that I have initiated these investigations. I have. The first time I found out, they said in their 51-page response to my anti-SLAPP was that because they tried to shut me up during an election. It was very political. It was filed the week before early voting, and so when they did that, they also had the burden of proof to show that what I said was not true. Yeah. They had none of that. That's why they non-suited. They non-suited when they felt like the AG was going to represent me. They didn't non-suit over any of those issues. So there's a constant blurring of the line. The paperwork for the lawsuit was notarized by somebody in the ISD during ISD hours. So it's a constant blurring of the lines. Right. They're doing the auditing. They're keeping the books. The same board members are on the...
So for our viewers, I think it's really important. I'm sorry you were going through this.
That's okay.
But you're tough.
I'm going to appeal it.
I know.
Yes.
And you're tough. But the truth is, this isn't just you.
No.
We hear about this all the time.
Yes.
By this big ed cartel, the entities that are trying to protect over $100 billion. Well, no, let me be clear. 40 cents on the dollar goes into the schools, into the classrooms, which means over $64 billion a year flows out to this education cartel that are driving us into just oblivion with debt.
Yes.
And they are fighting like heck against people like you that are calling it out. And I'll say I've been threatened too.
Yeah.
After I put out I didn't even say it. I didn't do it, but a trustee came and sat down on my podcast and talked about the TASB conference where Moat Casey's leader went and told into several different panels that not to give teacher pay raises, we need to, I think he said, weaponize it for the 88th legislative session. And we got the calls too, and the threats of $1,200 an hour attorneys and all that. So this
but they came before
Texans.
The legislature and superintendents on their behalf doing their business because, as you know, we have a committee of 8.
Yeah.
So, but doing their on behalf of them, testified, well, just give us the money. Just
give us more money.
Basic allotment.
Just take more
Don't
money.
Specify it for teachers. We'll give it to the teachers. We knew that was not going to happen.
Right.
And so you have superintendents arguing against teacher pay raises.
And lying, saying
and the
that
same
it's
thing
you.
when you have a $175 million foundation and you're only giving 2% or around 2% back to your classroom teachers. Something is terribly wrong here.
This is why I call it a cartel.
You are in existence for an educational purpose.
Right.
What is the purpose of political lawfare?
Right.
What is the purpose of promoting your director of the fund for office?
Yeah.
And you think that nobody is going to look and see
what they use lawfare.
Right. But my quotes were specifically towards my opponent, not towards the education fund.
Right.
I know they blur the lines all of the time. I didn't blur the lines. I directed them at my opponent and what my opponent was doing with the fund.
Right.
And so...
Because his private entity, America's Holdings, was benefiting, clearly.
Yes.
That would just make sense.
Yes.
I mean, this just blows my mind. I am really grateful.
And the superintendent last summer went and got a tax abatement on the luxury development that they built.
I am grateful to the TEA under Commissioner Rath's leadership. We've got Levi Fuller there that is handling all of the investigations. I'm grateful for them for launching this. I hope the Attorney General's office looks into this.
I do too.
It's not just Barbers Hill. I want to be clear.
Yes.
It is all across our state. And Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick did make looking into these education foundations a priority because they are using the name, image, and likeness.
Right.
Where we all want to do for our communities.
It's
we
for the
all
children.
want our kids to get right.
Yes.
It sounds like the bond packs.
Yeah.
Borny for the kids and Prosper for the kids. And it's always for the kids. And they weaponize our love of our kids and our desire for them to be educated and prosperous in the future. And this is why I call it the education cartel.
And when you say 100% of this fund goes to, solely to benefit students and teachers. It's 2%. And people start asking questions. Well, they're asking questions for a reason, and it's not just me asking the questions
and
any
the
longer.
lawfare that's being used is wrong.
Yes.
Thank goodness there are people. Thank you for speaking out about this, because I've talked to trustees that have received the letters from the lawyers. You can't say this. You can't do this. Lawfare is a part of the cartel's tactics.
It is.
And we have to expose it.
And that's why they sued me in my individual capacity.
That's right.
And not my official, even though those statements were official.
Yes.
And I can't imagine any appellate court not siding with the very fact that you cannot silence political speech. That has been protected for eons.
I want you to look in this camera. And I know we've talked a lot about your specific circumstance, but I want you to look in that camera. Tell Texans what's happening with their tax dollars, the lawfare that is being used against leaders that are trying to protect kids, keep money in their pockets, and Texas prosperous, and why they need to stand up against the education cartel.
We do, and we need to ban taxpayer-funded lobbyists. It is a priority for Galveston County in particular. They have worked against taxpayers nonstop. And not only that, it's not just like a government relations person from a city or a school district coming in and advocating for that school district. They are advocating for things like keeping, boys out of women's restrooms. I mean, all sorts of things. They are electioneering and promoting candidates, one to run against me, at their conferences. This is a total misuse of taxpayer dollars. It is nonstop. It is continual. And many of them have worked over the years to put things in statute that benefit them, like judge training. It can only be done through Texas Association of Counties. I have a bill to decouple that. But so if we can't get the whole ball of wax passed on banning taxpayer-funded lobbyists, let's dismantle. Let's create transparency. Let's create where they're not the sole people that have put themselves into statute, so that it's only to their benefit and not to the taxpayers' benefit.
Well, I think we are going to get the full enchilada, banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, putting in spending restrictions, getting us towards a path out of this unsustainable debt, and clamping down and ending this education cartel that makes the lives of parents miserable, teachers paid low, and that harms our children in the future of Texas. Representative Leo-Wilson, we are so grateful that you are willing to shine a light on the corruption that unfortunately does take place, and for fighting at the Capitol to end many of these abhorrent practices. We will be thinking about you and praying for you. Thank you for telling the whole story. Thank you for joining us today on Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin. And now you have the power.